not trimmed this. So
Okay.
don't worry about it.
Airbrush it.
All right, so let's start. Welcome to St. Louis Writers Guild's author series. This is our webinar/lecture series, and we're actually filming a special one today from our workshop. So if you missed the workshop, here's your kind of next chance to catch a little glimpse of it. Today I'm sitting with Suzann Ledbetter Ellingsworth. Pardon me for butchering it.
It's quite the mouthful.
Is a multi-published fiction and nonfiction writer and editor, in her parlance, a Redditor. Suzann is a Writers Hall of Fame of America inductee, past faculty member for Washington University's Summer Institute, and a contributing editor for Family Circle magazine for a decade. You can learn more about her editing services at thewalkingdeadline.com, and you can find out more about her books at SuzannLedbetter.com or SuzannEllingsworth.com. And all those links should be accompanying this video. Just look a little bit below it in the comments section. Excellent. So today we are here with editor Suzann, who just gave an amazing workshop for us that we all learned how all the things we're doing wrong in terms of editing. So my first question actually is there any like top tip you can give as an editor to someone who is trying to edit themselves besides don't do it?
Well, you have to learn to edit yourself.
Okay.
But editing yourself, just understand there is an element of ventriloquism involved, because it's really hard to edit your own voice. You're not going to catch things people that don't know you will. The biggest thing is just pay attention. And the other thing might be to buy a used and falling apart copy of your favorite novel and analyze it. You learn by doing. You don't learn by absorbing. And so re-edit it. Analyze how they did the transition, why their dialogue was so great. You can learn an awful lot from what other people do, and then you apply it to your own work. That's not plagiarism or copying or anything. That's learning by doing.
Excellent. That's a really good idea, actually, picking the book. I enjoyed that one. So now, in terms of approaching an editor such as yourself, how should someone do that?
All they have to do is email me.
Excellent.
I want to know about what kind of project they have and the length from the get-go. And we email back and forth so they get a little better acquainted with me. I get a little better acquainted with their work, because I don't edit people, I edit books. The writer is the conduit for the story, and I'm kind of the landscaper for the story, but the story is the boss. And the writer often needs to just get out of his or her own way, and I point that out. But I teach more than I edit, because I don't say do this, do that without a why. If I can't explain why I believe something needs to be done, I don't say anything, because I don't have a valid point unless I can explain it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, the teaching part. I've learned more from the editors I've worked with than any class I've ever taken.
Well,
So
but actually,
I
editors of publishing houses anymore, they haven't edited in 20 years because they haven't had time. They acquire. And they hate that, because editing for story is what they do and what they love. And the other part is just kind of mechanical. And yes, they may send you a revision letter with 4 or 5 generalized paragraphs, which really doesn't help a whole lot. And they know it, but they're trying to give input with what time that they have.
Yeah, it's the freelance editors I was actually talking about, not the editors at the big
You
houses.
have to have a why. Otherwise, and you know, that's not to say that having a why is 100% objective, but it's a heck of a lot closer to it than just saying do this, do that. And I learned that from an editor that wanted me to change the ending of a book. And I went ape blank. I really did, because, I mean, the book ended the way I thought the book should end. I had to come up, I couldn't just say, no, I like it the way it is. That's prima donna. I couldn't change it because it screwed up the story, so I spent 2 days figuring out good and sufficient reasons why the change called for would not only affect the ending, but would affect the cascade of the story from the beginning. That worked, because it was concrete.
So, do you have a favorite thing you do as an editor? Is like there one thing you're always looking for, or a top thing you're always looking for in people's books?
No, not really.
Okay.
It's more personal than that. The story needs to be there. There's always some just amazingly good stuff in there. One thing that, unfortunately, and I try to fix it, but I get lost in the story myself, so I forget. If it's anything I don't do enough of, it's to put good line in the notes or in the margin. And so instead you kind of get hit with a wallop of stuff that needs to be changed. I should do that. But when you're in the story, that's kind of what your focus is. And no, I just like teaming with a writer to make the story the best it can be and to guide their revisions, because what I edit probably isn't close to what that story can be.
Okay, that's good to know. We do actually have a few people here who stuck around after the workshop to ask a few questions. So anyone out there have a question?
I was intrigued by your concept of the book, and I wish you
The
would share
book.
that with people.
Yes, that is one of the coolest things. You take a cheapy spiral notebook and you put a label on the front of it with your book title, and that is your book. And you put everything in there. If you get brainstorms in the shower, and I also mentioned if you do get brainstorms in the shower, you ought to get the waterproof crayons kids use in the bathtub, because you can write that stuff down and then it washes off. It's not just for kids. And so you can, those little snips of dialogue that you get when you're sitting in traffic, all that kind of stuff you put in your book. You will, because that's what things are about and nothing's really a coincidence. You will notice articles in magazines or on websites or in newspapers that may or may not have something to do with your book. Cut them out, scotch tape them in your book. Put all this stuff together. It's way better than having a file. It's way better than typing all this crap into a computer file. Why bother? Just do it the old-fashioned way in a book. So you can attach these little notes that you've got on Post-it notes that you stuck in your pocket to keep. You've got it all there together when and if you need it.
Would you clarify your idea of assumptive action, which sounded to me like a very interesting way to cut a lot of fat out of novels?
Absolutely.
Yeah, assumptive action, that was good.
An assumptive action is any action that the reader will assume happened, that you don't need to notate in the story. But writers naturally do that because they are watching a mental movie. And so they're recording what they're observing in their mind, and they're putting in way too much detail. For example, and this is an exaggeration on purpose, but Joe pulled up at the curb. He shifted the car and parked, turned off the ignition, removed the keys, opened the car door, stepped out, shut the car door, walked around the car and up the sidewalk and rang the doorbell. Okay, you saw all that happen in your mental movie, but you don't need any of it. In fact, you don't need 7/8 of it. Joe parked the car, and then he rang the doorbell. No reader is going to think he levitated or flew like Peter Pan between the inside of the car and the door. And so those things in between that you don't need are assumptive action. And the reason they're important is if you don't put in actions that are assumed throughout the book, and then at some point in a scene you write, Joe parked the car at the curb. He turned off the ignition. The keys jangled as he removed them. He opened the door and slammed it. The reader knows by the detail that is different now, it's not in every scene, that something major is about to happen. So it puts the emphasis where it belongs instead of putting superfluous emphasis on junk that doesn't belong. That's assumptive action.
Thank you.
I was personally convicted by the list of words that we were supposed to search and find. Specifically all the looks and steps and
Yes.
smiles, because I'm very guilty of those.
Everybody is.
Yeah, the looks especially. I'm
Everybody,
horribly
you
guilty
read
of
it
that.
in New York Times best-selling novels all the time. That doesn't make it right. And it truly is an omniscient point of view with the writer telegraphing that mental movie onto the reader rather than the story being in the character's point of view. And so when you do have a sentence, John saw the car park at the curb, that's standard operating procedure in most novels. But who's seen John see the car park at the curb? The writer. So just leave out the John saw the car parked at the curb. The reader knows who's seeing it. Who else could be seeing it? You're in a point of view. But doing the search on words like look or stepped or walk or whatever, again, it brings you to where they happen. and you've got this little bitty piece of something that is tell, that all you have to do is fix that to show, and you're good. And then you go on to the next one. Instead of trying to do an entire revision, and every time you notice a look, which you're going to miss some, every time you notice it, then you're, oh God, I got to rewrite that. It's a whole lot easier, because it is mechanical, just to go look, 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 look all the way through and fix them.
Mhm. Thank you. I will definitely try that. Maybe
Yes.
when I get home.
I will be
Sure.
removing gazes from my books too.
Oh,
So.
Yes, please remove gaze. There are many,
Uh,
many people that truly detest the word gaze, and I am one of them.
Sounds good. Is there any other questions?
I just had one other, I copied down a quote that you said, and I wanted to maybe see if you would elaborate on that for the viewers. You said that the writing is in the revision, you cannot write until you know the story yourself.
Exactly right. Everybody, you know, I've gone to a lot of writers' conferences over the year. I've heard a lot of speakers, and people, whether they be editors or agents or other writers, are always emphasizing how the first 3 chapters have to be right, or the first 50 pages for a submission or whatever. Number one, that's dumb, because no editor or agent is going to look at the first 3 chapters of a book and sell it. The book has to be done. So don't focus on the first 3 chapters of the first 50 pages. That focus might need to go to the revision part. But nobody knows a story until it's told. So you always write forward. You convince yourself, have confidence in the fact, once you know the story, which is only possible when you have told it all the way through, all that knowledge that you have gained yourself can now go back and apply to the revisions. So that's why all the writing actually comes in the revision, not in writing the first draft, because you don't know 100% where you're going either. So until that story is complete, with all its flaws and bugaboos and good stuff and everything that's mixed in there, you cannot revise it. But now you have the tools to do it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You missed a great workshop. Sorry about that. Hope this little bit will help you out there. Like I said, if you would like to know more about Suzann Ledbetter Ellingsworth's her editing, do check out thewalkingdeadline.com, and do check out her other 2 websites for all her amazing books, SuzannLedbetter.com and SuzannEllingsworth.com. Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
has been a true pleasure.
I've
We
had
enjoyed
a great day. Thank you so much.
it. Excellent.